So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. And I'm just going to start. The consonance of life and myth is masterfully represented in the film I Know Where I'm Going from 1945. As the ironic title declares, a young woman who believes she knows what she wants undergoes a deep transformation that will change the course of her life. Her self-confidence is put to the test when she travels from the interior of England to a maritime region in Scotland in order to marry her wealthy boss. The spirit of the coast imposes a change in plans. A storm interrupts her journey and obliges her to take refuge on an island in the Hebrides. Here she comes into contact with the local traditions. They reflect a philosophy opposite of her own, which nevertheless attracts her more and more. A whirlwind of conflicting feelings takes hold of her as, little by little, she falls in love with an impoverished young aristocrat. The film is nominally a work of fiction, but halfway between dream and reality, it is also an ethnographic documentary that reflects the life of the inhabitants of the island. It is, above all, a quest narrative in which the hero must face different tests to achieve her goal. In fact, it represents an anti-quest, or the inverse of a masculine journey, since the heroine travels to reunite with her fiancé, but ends up rejecting him. In the process, she discovers herself and a new understanding of love. The young protagonist's voyage of self-knowledge is built on several narrative elements: the transfer from a familiar environment to a new territory, the figure of the guide, temptation, crisis, descent into the underworld, ascent, resurrection, and the final gift. In effect, the narrative closely resembles a fairy tale in which a young girl becomes an adult who knows what she wants. The characters are original, not simple archetypes, but their names are mostly allegorical. More than simply describing the people, they seem to predict their future. The protagonist, Joan Webster, whose name points to heroine, but also to weaver, is a hard-working, brave girl. Nevertheless, her main goal is achieving wealth and luxury. Her fiancé, the head of a chemical company and one of the richest men in England, has profited from shady business deals during the Second World War. His name, Robert Bellinger, suggests a belligerent conqueror. Once in Scotland, Joan meets Torquil MacNeil, a young naval officer who will be her guide. The name Torquil, derived from Thor, the god of thunder, and Kel, a sacrificial cauldron, foreshadows the storm in which the protagonists will be trapped. His surname, MacNeil, designates an ancient Scottish clan. Torquil advises that Joan stay in a house belonging to Catriona MacLean, a strong and clairvoyant woman. Significantly, she bears the same name as an ancestor who was murdered by her husband after he surprised her with her lover. The third most ancient and powerful clan of the Scottish Highlands is represented in the figure of John Campbell, whose elderly parents are celebrating their diamond wedding anniversary. The couple is related to the aristocratic owner of Agnacroish, which suggests anachronistic and means field of the cross. And the examples don't end here. So I wrote 65 pages in Spanish, and this is just 10, so just a brief summary. A sense of double temporality impregnates the film, not only because of the confluence of historical and mythic events, but also because of the synchronism of past and present. Many of the sequences use images that merge the real with the fantastic. Two particularly original examples of this are when the station master's top hat is transformed into the chimney of a train, or when the Scottish hills appear to be wrapped in tartans. The film, which was made in 1944, had its premiere several months after the end of the Second World War, which is pervasive but scarcely perceptible. The bridge between past and present is constructed by a series of ballads that allude to another war, the Jacobite Rebellion, that took place exactly 200 years earlier. That conflict left such a mark on the island's inhabitants that, like a ghostly presence, seems to affect them even more than the contemporaneous World War. One of the most moving songs about that brutal confrontation, the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, plays in the background like a welcome when Joan arrives in Scotland. The islanders' identity links their present to a mythic past. The festival of Cayley, which leads Joan into the ethnographic heart of the community, transmits happiness but also a profound sense of nostalgia. One of the songs performed in honor of the elderly couple is The Campbells Are Coming. Inspired by the Jacobite Rebellion, it alludes to an episode that affected the Scottish consciousness in general and the Campbells in particular, the imprisonment of Mary, Queen of Scots, in the Loch Leven castle. Another son, it has been said that this is a musical film in a way. Another son, The Nut Brown Maid, centers on the love affair between a man and a woman. The son allows Tausiet to reveal his feelings for Joan indirectly. Just before the ending, it is heard again, this time performed by the 3 bagpipers hired for Joan's wedding, who never managed to play. As a counterpoint, the traditional ballad I Know Where I Am Going, which lends its title to the film, sounds at the very end. It is the same sound we hear at the beginning, but given Joan's transformation, its meaning is now completely different. And we can listen to it. The opening credits give us some indication of the protagonist's changes. The little Joan, who first appears crawling at foot speed, metamorphoses into a materialistic child of 5 who writes a letter to Santa Claus asking for a stocking made of real stockings, not nylon. Next, she is seen at 12 with her first pair of stockings. At 18, the young woman prefers to eat at the best restaurant in Manchester, and at 25, she is already accustomed to a life of luxury. But the real evolution doesn't begin until she moves to the Hebrides. This transformation is expressed above all through her dreams and her direct contact with the forces of nature. The director's love of surrealism is evident in the dream Joan has in a sleeping car during her journey. In this dream, which we will see in a minute, her own father leads a ceremony in which she is married not to a man, but rather to a factory, Consolidated Chemical Industries. Meanwhile, her white satin wedding dress shines remarkably, matching the sparkle of her engagement ring. As soon as she becomes the rich and glamorous Mrs. Bellinger, her short hair is transformed into the long blonde mane of Hollywood actresses. And instead of rice, pound notes flutter in the air. So let's see it.
We'll send it there. 500 guineas, 500 guineas. To you, madame. Take you, madame. Ladies, village of car.
You take the high road and I'll take the low road and I'll be in Scotland before next station, Gretna Green. You're over the border now.
Glasgow Central.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Oh no, sorry. Here. A violent storm will throw Joan's dream of a life of riches. Once in Scotland, she says a prayer asking for the wind to clear away the fog that is keeping her from her destination. The power of nocturnal dreams is a half-Christian, half-pagan belief. Tolkien has assured Joan that when one sleeps in a house for the first time, one's dreams will become reality if one counts the beams of the bedroom. She sleeps in a room with a circular roof and after counting the beams, recites a brief prayer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, please, Lord, don't let the wind drop and let it blow the fog away. One of the hidden keys to the film is the prominence of the number 5. As we have seen, the opening credits summarize the protagonist's development in 5 fundamental phases. And although her subsequent evolution is much more detailed, it also follows the same pattern, since it takes place over 5 days and 5 nights. In this sense, Tolkien's suggestion that Joan count the 5 beams might be understood as an invitation to count herself, according to the stages she is passing through. Joan's calculating prayer will not achieve the desired effect. The following morning, the strong wind has dissipated the fog, but now it has stirred up a dangerous storm. Even so, Joan tries to get to the island as soon as possible. From this point on, the power of nature will impose itself with full force. The furious waters, and in particular the whirlpool in which she almost drowns, bring about a cathartic initiation. Just as in Shakespeare's famous play, The Tempest, the sea spits out whoever enters into it completely changed. The whirlpool sequence is the symbolic center of the film. In it, Joan comes out of the abyss and faces the consequences of her hubris. Thanks to Tolkien, she will be saved, but realizing that she has put herself and her 2 companions in mortal danger, she returns to dry land a new person. In the midst of the heavy seas, her idolized wedding dress has fallen into the water and been swept away by the hurricane. With it, the last vestiges of her materialism disappear. And I quote, "Wonder what happened to my wedding dress," she tells Tolkien the day after, and he replies, "A mermaid will marry in it." Behind its simplicity, the film resists classification. The initial mocking tone gives way to a gentler fairy tale mood when Joan arrives in Scotland. And despite the apparent idealization of rural life, it is not a nostalgic movie. On the one hand, the island of Mull, with its majestic landscape, the solidarity of its people, and the beauty of its dances, is a pastoral refuge. But on the other hand, there are hints of lingering ancient and bloody acts of vengeance. The law of Talion, so fundamental to many fairy tales, breathes beneath the plot. The link between life and myth constitutes the core of the film. An invisible thread connects reality with fiction and runs through the character's psychology. In particular, the feelings of the protagonists are affected by a series of ancestral memories reflected in 2 legends. One, medieval in origin, tells the story of a shipwreck caused by a reckless prince. The second, conceived by the directors on the basis of traditional folklore motifs, is a bloody tale of vengeance that unleashes a curse ante mortem. The first legend is situated in the whirlpool of Corribreccan. The name is associated with a tale about a prince called Breccan who perished in a shipwreck along with all his crew. The day after they meet, Joan and Torquil go to the radio station in Tobermory when Joan asks about a picture that has attracted her attention. and says, "The legend of Corrie Breckan," and he replies, "It is the second biggest whirlpool in Europe. It lies northeast of Killoran. Corrie means cauldron or whirlpool. Breckan was a prince of Norway. He sought the daughter of the Lord of the Isles to marry her. The Lord of the Isles refused to give away his daughter, except on one condition. Prince Breckan must anchor his galley in Corrie Breckan for 3 days and nights. He went straight back to Norway. There he asked the advice of the old men. They told him to take 3 anchor ropes, one of hemp, one of flax, and the third rope was made of the hair of maidens who are faithful to their lovers. The maidens gave their tresses, and Prince Breckan sailed for the Hebrides. The first night the hemp rope broke. The second night the flax rope broke. But the third rope held fast. The third night. The narration is interrupted here, but when Joan is in the boat at the edge of the whirlpool, she asks Torquil to resume the story that he left off 2 days earlier. "You never finished the story about the Norwegian prince. What happened to the third rope made from the hair of faithful maidens? It held until the tide turned, but one maiden was untrue to her lover, only one, and when that strand broke, the whole rope broke with it." The story of the shipwreck of the Norwegian prince exists in several different versions. According to one variant, the women have a greater role and more power. For example, the condition for marriage is imposed by the maiden, not by her father. Likewise, the advice to use 3 ropes to anchor the boat comes not from wise men, but from an ancient witch. The rope materials vary from hemp or horsehair for the first rope, and linen, wool, or sealskin for the second, but all versions agree in that the third rope is woven from the hair of innocent, pure young women, or in some cases virgins. With roots in ancient beliefs in the magical power of virginity, the traditional variants allude to the virtue of the maidens, rather than to the women's loyalty to their lovers, which appears in the script from an implicitly sexist perspective. Be that as it may, as in many other traditional and present-day myths, hair is an essential symbol. It represents vital energy and is often related to inspiration. The hair of the head has been compared to a kind of personal aura that embodies the most intimate thoughts of an individual. The power of a virgin's hair constitutes an important motif in many fairy tales, such as Rapunzel. In this story, the maiden's locks are like an umbilical cord tying her to her hyperprotective mother, which must be cut in order for the girl to become independent and find her own path. The legend of the Prince of Corrie Breckan, which presents an evolution from the most fragile to the most solid, also evokes folk tales such as the 3 Little Pigs, in which the animals make successively stronger huts, the first of straw, the second of wood, and the third of bricks. The story exemplifies how extra effort can yield great reward. Nevertheless, unlike the happy ending that awaits the 3 Pig brothers, the story of Prince Breckan thwarts expectations since the third rope, which should be stronger, breaks, triggering the calamity. In a way, the faithful legend of the whirlpool pushes Joan to understand her own striving and what is important to her. In fantasy, as in reality, love intervenes and determines the final outcome. In the story of the Scandinavian prince, the disloyalty of a single woman is sufficient reason to bring about the misfortune of 50 men. The lack of love in the legend contrasts with the dedication of Torquil, who throws himself into the raging sea to save Joan. Torquil ends his story about the tragedy of the prince by adding a personal commentary. Nothing is stronger than true love. Tradition determines the character of the islanders. In spite of his cheerful disposition, Torquil lives under the weight of a evil spell, cast upon the men of his family centuries earlier. This terrible prophecy, resulting from frustrated love, constitutes the second legendary building block in the narrative. Although it is mentioned twice in the film, the enigma of the curse is not revealed until the end, when a woman's voice, seductive and melodious like a fairy's, is heard off camera. It is the voice of Torquil's old nurse who tells the prophecy related to the castle, and I am going to summarize because of the lack of time. Once upon a time, MacNeil of Killoran took a beautiful wife, but she was in love with a cousin of hers, a MacLean. After a year and a day, when her husband was away, she escaped from Killoran and took refuge with her lover. One black night, Killoran came. He besieged and took the castle and killed every soul except the two lovers. There is a deep dungeon just off the hall. It is a well just big enough for a man to stand on or drown. Killoran tricked the two lovers, chained them together, and threw them into the dungeon. He sat in the great hall, feasted and mocked them, until they dragged one another down. Before she died, the woman cursed Killoran and every future MacNeil of Killoran, if they should ever cross the threshold of the castle. It is a terrible, strong curse. It goes, "This is the curse of Catriona MacLean of Erraig, my curse on MacNeil of Killoran and every MacNeil after him. If he shall ever cross the threshold of Moy, never shall he leave it a free man. He shall be chained to a woman to the end of his days." Although this is not a romantic film in the usual sense, love permeates it from beginning to end, not only in the protagonist's vicissitudes, but also in the strong bonds that unite other couples. The youngsters, ta-ta-ta, and the elderly, ta-ta-ta, I'm summarizing, provide an exemplary background for the lovers' trials and contribute to the success of their union. 3 days after John's arrival in Scotland, the Campbells celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary. In the middle of the party, the couple's son rises and exclaims euphorically, "Friends and neighbors, 100,000 blessings on my parents. They are 61 years, married this day. Peace and happiness be with them, the pride of the great Clan Campbell." The number 61, which adds a day to the usual anniversary, invokes the symbolism of a year and a day associated in folk literature with the period within which heroes must complete their quest. At the end of the 18th century, the idea of a chivalric trial period lasting a year and a day became associated with the belief that in Scotland, since the Middle Ages, there had existed an equivalent trial marriage period of a year and a day. And I summarize. The script writers wink ironically at this kind of mythologizing. According to the legend of the Carrs, the Lord of Killoran looked for a wife on the mainland. When a year and a day had passed, the woman fled Killoran and was reunited with the man she loved. One dark night, the husband raised the castle before torturing and assassinating the lovers. In this mythic context, the wife's flight would have marked an end to the trial period for the couple, freeing her from her matrimonial vow after the customary period, as well as from any blame associated with adultery. The fictional story of heartbreak stands in contrast to the real love story between the elderly Campbells, who are celebrating not 60 but 61 years of marriage. This extra day represents the quality of their loving promise, one so prolonged that it requires a number expressing what has no end. The sentence, "forever and a day," is characteristic of fairy tales. In the 1001 Nights, for example, the number refers not to a concrete figure, but to innumerable, infinite nights. And I'm finishing now. The importance of time, past and future, but above all, the importance of waiting, is underscored through the film. The Campbells' marriage constitutes a vivid image of a long-lasting love. The youngsters look forward to their wedding day, but without impatience, something John is not capable of understanding. The curse of the castle projects the threat of a perpetual punishment. Nevertheless, the directors, with their characteristic sense of humor, transform the fateful prophecy into hope of a common future for the lovers. It is, without doubt, an optimistic ending that confirms the triumph of true love over pragmatism. But it doesn't mean that everything has been resolved. Joan's journey to a world opposite her own has just begun, and she has much to learn. Perhaps the only really important thing for someone like her, incapable of slowing down, is to trust that, as Henry Longfellow affirmed, all things come round to him who will but wait. Thank you very much.